Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy Young Falcon here, and welcome to part 3 of the Platinum Games Retrospective. I'm going to be taking a look at the last two 360 generation games, which is going to be Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance and Anarchy Reigns. Now, before we fully get into those, I know in my last video I was talking about how we're going to jump into the Wii U generation, but as that is an entirely new generation on its own, and on top of that we'll be approaching new generations of consoles, I decided to hold off on those videos and kind of group them together in one massive list, because we're going to be going over a lot of their third-party licensed games, Legend of Korra, Transformers Devastation, and the TMNT game, along with the Wii U exclusives like Bayonetta 2 and Wonderful 101. So it's going to be one of my more longer, big videos, and I really am excited to work on that one. But for now, let's focus on rounding up the last two Platinum games of the previous generation of consoles. So with that all being said, let's begin. So fresh off the heels of Vanquish, we had a brand new Platinum Games coming out in 2012. This game was known as Max Anarchy, which released in Japan first, and then later as Anarchy Reigns when it released to PAL and American territories. What are my thoughts on this game? Gonna be honest, I'm gonna make this one extremely quick. I didn't really like it. I thought it was very repetitive, kind of dull, and overall mediocre. Maybe the multiplayer was super good for its time and creative, and I see a lot of aspects of that in the way the maps are designed. There's a lot of cool random events that pop up in maps, and the PvP aspects with bots is really dope. I do like the way the maps are designed. They have a lot of cool pathways and environments, and it just feels very bouncy and fun in that regard. I'm not really a huge fan of the art style / graphic style here. It just is very drab and boring. It's just grays and browns everywhere, and it feels like the characters aren't really fleshed out in terms of character and style. It just all feels like cybernetic stuff, cyberpunk stuff, kind of, not even. I don't know, it just feels meh, very meh. I'm sorry, I wasn't really a huge fan of this game and its gameplay. I liked playing as the side characters for the most part, but a lot of them just kind of boiled down to mash X, hold Y every once in a while, mash Y. You get the gist. Basically, they took a lot of the formula from Mad World, you know, the context-sensitive grab buttons, they able to pick people up and do a lot of cool cutscenes and interactions and stuff of that nature, but at the same time, instead of me wiggling the Wii remote and throwing people and having this crazy kind of arcade-like experience where you're throwing people into blenders of fan blades and like ramming telephone poles or whatever straight into people's skulls and all that crazy stuff. It's just kind of, you know, throw a tire on a guy, pick him up. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't have it lacks the same punch Mad World, you know, brought with it. On top of that, I didn't beat the campaign. I'm sorry, this will honestly be the only Platinum game I don't get through, mainly because I just couldn't take how repetitive it was. The fundamental game design is extremely flawed, as you play through the game, you have to repeat missions to unlock a certain amount of XP to unlock the next mission. And if you don't do well on the free missions, or you figure out controls, or you don't clear it fast enough, you get a bronze medal. If you get a bronze medal, you basically have to replay the same exact segments over and over and over and over again just to unlock a main mission. Now, I'm sorry, but for me personally, I could not sit there and grind that. I was not going to sit there and grind the same exact missions over and over and over and over and over and over again, sometimes several times, just to unlock a new main mission because I'm either doing poorly on them or whatever. And I don't even know what to optimize. The game's ranking system isn't clear enough. One time I completely didn't take any damage, but I guess I took too long, so I had to do it because I got a silver medal, and I was just close enough to getting a main mission, but I wasn't, so I had to replay the mission again. You guys get the issues here. You just don't get enough reward out of these things. And on top of that, I don't want to play through the same free missions and main missions over and over just to unlock the next part of a story that I don't really care about, that comes off as just boring. And yes, they're 6 hours apiece. It's Jack's storyline and some other guy named Leo, I think. And I'm sure it's an interesting story. I didn't really get too invested. It just felt like another Mad World extension, and Jack has a kid, and I guess he's becoming that he doesn't like killing or something. I don't know. It's generic. It was boring. It wasn't my cup of tea. The gameplay on top of that, despite having some cool ideals and some dope concepts with like the killer moves, using the left trigger and using the X button to unleash these super kind of special moves and build up special gauge and all that, just come off as kind of boring after a while, and gets very, again, repetitive. It's unfortunate, it sucks, but that's the state we're in. Now, there is a couple cool things about this game. I do like how you can play with bots, although the AI is very dumb to say the least. Sometimes they're very good at helping you in your cause. Sometimes in certain games like Deathball, they're just absolutely useless, and the enemy team just completely stomps on you. They're super coordinated, and then your teammates are just bricks, you know what I'm saying, just dumb, which is frustrating because I can't fully enjoy these modes the way they're supposed to be intended without playing online, and since online isn't really a thing for this game anymore, it's kind of hard to get that experience, you know what I'm saying. It's unfortunate. Now there's again one cool thing, which is Bayonetta was a pre-order bonus or a character you could buy for $2.99, and that's dope. That was it. You could just play as Bayonetta in Anarchy Reigns. That's just cool. You know, she was in a fighting game before Smash technically, so at least you have that little piece of Platinum Games history. The soundtrack is very well done. It's great, you know, fun, energetic music and all that. Highly recommend you download that OST onto your phone. Great stuff there. But overall, Anarchy Reigns is just mid. I'm sorry if you're a fan of it. Maybe you had some fond memories of the multiplayer back in the day. Great. And I'm sure if they re-release Anarchy Reigns now as like a free-to-play kind of MMO style game where you unlock characters with gems and get skins and loot boxes and all that stuff, it would be one of the most entertaining Platinum games out there if they purely focus on making fun, energetic multiplayer maps and, you know, added some new characters. Imagine playing this game now in a modern setting with some refined controls and a variety of skills with the skill tree, kind of similar to games like Paragon or, well, that game's dead too. Maybe this idea won't work out in the long run. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of cool stuff they could do, and with the Platinum Games character list growing ever so largely, there's a lot of new characters they could throw in too, making like a 3D brawler Smash Brothers style game, but with Platinum Games characters. Hey, maybe even Nintendo could get involved with special Switch characters, throw in some crossplay. All I'm saying is there's a lot of dope ideals Anarchy Reigns has, and I could really enjoy it because it has some good ideals going on, but in its current state, at least the way it was released for the 360 at the time, is missing a lot of good content, and it just kind of falls flat, which is unfortunate. So yes, petition it. Bring back Anarchy Reigns as a new $40 budget game or free-to-play budget game or whatever it may be that Platinum Games can fully invest in and just make it something really cool and unique. As for now, I honestly recommend picking this game up. It's like $2. Maybe you'll find more enjoyment than I did. It's very cheap these days. Just find out your local GameStop or something. You could get it really cheaply. So after the so-so mess that was Anarchy Reigns, we got a new game called Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. This game has a pretty interesting backstory, as it originally was supposed to be a more stealthy outlook on Raiden's life, with the unique blade cutting mechanic that the world was losing their mind over. However, after it going dormant after being shown off at a couple of E3s, we eventually got a brand new high-octane, fast-paced, and metal-rocking new Metal Gear game called Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, headed by Platinum Games. This was an interesting look at the Metal Gear Solid formula, as it's always been more of a stealth game, as we all know, so I was very curious to see Platinum Games take on the Metal Gear formula. How are they going to incorporate the famous cardboard boxes, drum barrels, and things of that nature, on top of keeping the gameplay of that fine Platinum Games quality? Well, only time would tell, and upon its release, I could say a lot of fans were more than satisfied. So with that being said, let's take a look at Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. The story of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance goes as followed. It takes place 4 years after Guns of the Patriots, or Metal Gear Solid 4 for those of you that are uninformed, as Raiden is defending an African governor of sorts. Eventually, these rogue desperado PMC private military corporations, for those of you that don't know, agents that start attacking the governor and of course his bodyguards, and it's up to Raiden to take these guys down. He tries his best to take them down and, well, does so in spectacular fashion, along with completely destroying a Metal Gear Rex, but overall ultimately ends up failing and getting his whole arm cut off by Jetstream Sam. Well, the game quickly takes place a couple years after those events. Raiden's back with a brand new cybernetic body, and it's up to him to track down these desperado guys, figure out what's their deal, who they're working for, and overall take these guys down with the help of some of his friends. The story is again pretty straightforward compared to the other Metal Gear games, but has a lot of political subtext and nuance that makes the game very interesting, again similar to some of the other Metal Gear games. It does have some twisty-turvy moments and often questions what it means to be human and stuff like that, You know, typical fake deep stuff you see in a Metal Gear game, but it's executed well enough that it can tug at the emotional heartstrings every once in a while. I don't want to get too in depth with the story here, as I actually do want people to experience it for themselves, and I know I guess that's a little bit of a cop-out. I could completely tell you the entire storyline, but I don't feel like I'll be doing it justice. When I first played this game, I was blown away completely because I knew nothing about it. I just was playing it because it was next up in my Metal Gear lineup, and I heard a lot of good things. Playing through it and realizing how great the story was one of the more interesting experiences I've had in my gaming history, and I really want people to have that same satisfaction. So I really hope you guys go out and play this game, as it's already highly recommended, and if you haven't had the time to go through and play it yet, then please give it a shot. Now, story is one thing, but gameplay is another. How is the gameplay of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance? Well, it's actually pretty darn good. Their game offers a variety of attacks, combos, skill trees to upgrade, and all sorts of great things. It has this Mega Man sense of progression. As you take down the Desperados, you end up gaining their weapons, which is pretty dope. I like all the variety of combos that are allowed thanks to the new weapon variations you get, whether it's an electric sai, a whole polearm that could detach and reattach and stretch out in length and things of that nature, or just a full-on pincer blade of sorts that could completely thrash through opponents. I also love the high frequency blade ratings equipped without the jump, because it offers a very quick, fast-paced combat system and allows for some pretty cool looking and devastating attacks. The best part about the game is the physics-based combat. Being able to chop bridges down and watch it fall on top of bad guys is really enjoyable, and also being able to cut exact parts of enemies out and rip out electric spines and crunch it to get your fuel cells or energy back up is also extremely cool. Nothing's more satisfying than walking to a crowd of enemies, perfectly parrying all their attacks, cutting open their torsos, grabbing those fuel cells, and charging your energy up rapidly. That type of stuff is great, and I really do enjoy the way the combat is presented. The enemy variety is really welcomed too. There's all sorts of unique enemies here. You have your typical grunts with batons and swords and rocket launchers and guns and, you know, the normal things. You also have these types of enemies that are in jetpacks. You have enemies that have jetpacks with rockets attached to them. You have geckos that you have to perfectly parry, gorilla type enemies. The list goes on. The variety of enemies here is very good, and they often mix it up just enough so the levels don't become too repetitive or drag out for too long. The length of the game isn't too bad, clocking in around 6 to 7 hours on your first playthrough, and if you know what you're doing, you could shave it down to around 4 to 5 as I did. Overall, the cutscenes of the game are extremely well presented, and the combat on top of that is very dope. I also like how there's not a too huge emphasis on quick time events, because it makes the gameplay flow much better. Being able to constantly interact with the game environment around you rather than having a quick time event play out constantly is one of the plus this action game has to offer. That's something Platinum Games loves to do, unless it comes to the Bayonetta franchise, which is more spectacle, but it's okay, you know, different strokes for different folks kind of thing. I really do enjoy Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance combat. There's a lot of great variety in upgrading your moves and things, although I wish it was a bit more fleshed out. It's great to earn new techniques, but often I don't find myself using them because they don't really fit into the flow of combat as well, or honestly just me forgetting that my moves are even there sometimes. The base combat's good enough, and you more often than not will just use your normal string of 4-button light attacks and then a couple heavy attacks thrown into the mix to clear out a crowd of enemies. There's also some decent sub-missions slash mini-games that are contained in each mission, which are really interesting, like walking around as these tiny little 3-armed robot dudes and stealthing around, electrifying opponents and things like that, and also just solving a couple of small puzzles along the way to complete your mission. Overall, the Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance gameplay is extremely solid, with a huge branching combo, which is really interesting to see, and of course, on top of all of that, some great enemy variety. The level design is also pretty top-notch. You never get too lost going through levels, and it's always varying and switching things up on you, whether you're in a city, a sewer, or the streets of Mexico, which is all good stuff. And one of the best things about this game too are the boss fights. They always feel so interesting and varied. Sometimes you're taking on hordes of enemies while trying to fight the boss, sometimes you just have to learn how to perfectly parry everything, and sometimes it just feels like a straight up 1v1 duel. All of these boss fights are really interesting and have a great climactic end, and I always just found them to be one of the more unique aspects of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and also one of the more well designed. The final boss in particular, which I'll try my best not to spoil here, is just super cool, all things considered, and he's easily one of my favorite Platinum Games bosses, and let alone one of my favorite action games bosses in the history of action games. So I highly enjoy Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance's gameplay. I think the storyline's pretty good, and the DLC on top of that is the icing on the cake, as it's also very well made. Complement that with a wonderful music score with a bunch of interesting tracks, whether ranging from lyrical to instrumental, with some great heavy metal and digital music, with some great heavy metal mixed with those digitized instruments, all works together and accumulates into one of the more interesting and honestly perfect Metal Gear games. There's not a lot I could say that's wrong with the game. I love the voice lines and dialogue that comes with the characters. Their interactions are often wholesome and just well created and done. And I also very much enjoy the bosses and their dialogue and banter between Raiden. The game overall was just extremely well made, and I highly recommend that you play it. So that's going to do it for our Platinum Games on the 360. We are officially done covering this console. Yes, I know there's a couple games that did release on the 360, but they also released on next gen, and I will be focusing on the next gen versions of those games rather than how their 360 ports stack up. Although I'll maybe occasionally take a glance just to see how they stack up graphically. Alright, with that all being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys very soon with part 4.